I'm starting to see more and more people calling for the bull market to be over, and I just simply don't think that's true. There is one pattern that I'm looking at that I'd like to show you in today's video that will likely close out the end of the year, which would send us into a bear market, but I still think we have some more upside. We'll be talking about this exact pattern, and we'll also be covering the fact that there is a $750 million whale that is currently shorting Bitcoin. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. So first of all, taking a look at the local price action as we normally do, you can see that Bitcoin is slowly grinding lower here, and we're failing to break above this trend line. Now, the moment we do break above it, I do think we will likely move higher out of that region, and we did tap into a pretty important level on the charts, which you can see is the value area high from this entire range. This yellow line over here got the wick into it, and we got a pretty aggressive bounce afterwards. Does this mean we're going to immediately reverse? I'm actually personally looking for some more retests of this level and even lower before considering entering a Bitcoin long. We'll have to see how it plays out. As I always share on the channel, I am fully allocated with my spot positioning into Bitcoin with a little bit of Ethereum. And so I still don't think that the bull market is over. This was a pretty solid retest. Now we'd like to see some continuation higher. However, as I said, I still think that there's a chance we can continue to grind a little bit lower. Now on the shorter time frames, you can see how this is starting to look. In theory, because we tapped into this level, if we can hold where we're currently at, which is right around 120.5K, we continue to bounce and close candles above that level, then the next target would be right here on the shorter time frames, and then we confirm above here, then we start targeting the previous all-time highs, which we saw acted as resistance and we covered on the channel at length. That previous all-time high, if you weren't aware, 124.6K. Reclaim that level, it is more than likely that we move much higher. That being said, I have still not entered any kind of aggressive swing longs because I still think there could be some more shakeouts to come. Now on the higher time frames, I wanted to discuss the quarterly candles. What you can see here from the bear market is very, very clear. Take a look at it. One green candle, a second green candle, and then a red candle. One green candle, a second green candle, and a red candle. One green candle, a second green candle, and a red candle. One green candle, a second green candle, and what do you see here? Another green candle. So, because these are quarterly candles, what I would be looking at here is, yes, Bitcoin to go ahead and actually move higher out of here. However, it is likely, in my opinion, that this quarterly candle can close red. Now that might sound crazy given the fact that a red quarterly candle would send us back below $114,000, but I actually think that this could be the case. In the upcoming weeks and months, Bitcoin will likely make a new aggressive all-time high in my opinion, and this candle will likely skyrocket much higher than where we're currently at, have that wick to the upside, and then we would likely go ahead and close red to wrap up the year. Now, I know a lot of you have been talking about potentially going into 2026, and that is a possibility, but you can't ignore this pattern at this current point in time. If we take a look at the monthly candle, there's something else I wanted to quickly address. You can see here that every single time that we fail to close above that previous month's wick, then at that point in time, we get further correction. Let me just show you exactly what I'm talking about. And we'll quickly start out here by looking at the previous cycle. We had this first top and we had this first original green candle. Then we had a second red candle and we failed to close above the wick of this candle, sending us quite a bit lower. This was a pretty steep correction. And if we measure it from the top here, you can see that we actually dropped from this wick down to the lows approximately 55%, a pretty huge correction. Now, the correction that sent us into the bear market, we had this green candle and we once again failed to close above this wick, sending us into that bear market. Now, I don't need to tell you how steep of a correction this was. I think we will likely see something similar despite the fact that we have a lot of institutions piling in. It won't likely be an 85% correction. However, I do think that a 60% correction plus is in the cards for this bear market. Next thing, we could talk about scenarios where it doesn't just lead us into a bear market. What happened over here? We had a pretty bullish candle. Then we failed to close above this high, and this was actually a pretty steep correction, sending us much lower. Same thing over here. We had a pretty big move to the upside. This was ultimately a red candle, and we pumped, liquidated a lot of those shorts that piled in over here. Then we ended up moving much, much lower. Why, you might ask? Because the body of the candle did not close above this level. Now, if we start to see something like this, it's highly likely that Bitcoin gets a little bit of a bigger correction. I just wanted to bring this to your attention because if Bitcoin can't close the month above this level over here, which is actually found right around 124.7K, then at that point in time, maybe there will be further downside. However, we're not even halfway through the month, and so perhaps we end up going ahead and closing above that level. That being said, back to the 3 months chart, as we just covered, I would like to see this candle still explode much higher, likely above $130,000 per Bitcoin, and I do think that 150K is in the cards. However, if you've been watching the channel, you know that I've been talking about 130 to as high as 160, but honestly, my base case is that I would start offloading a lot of my Bitcoin when we surpass $130,000. And if you're in my free premium group, you already know that I shared that I offloaded some Bitcoin when we made a brand new all-time high. By the way, if you want to join that group, you do have the first link in my description down below. You click this link, it'll bring you to Telegram. You DM me the word premium, and I would be happy to onboard you into my free premium group where I provide my own personal trade setups as well as my spot portfolio allocation. Now, that's enough charting for today. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Bitcoin is still trying to hold this level, and perhaps we're getting the bounce here and we're about to retest this trend line. If we are to get rejected once more, it would be right around these levels, 122.5 to 0.7K, call it that level. And if we do retrace, I would be looking for longs in this market as we start to see more and more shorts pile in. Speaking of shorts, we did have this whale valued at $750 million. He actually entered right around 120.9K, a pretty shitty entry if you ask me, and the price is currently sitting just below $122,000. He's getting paid tremendously in funding, but his P&L is currently sitting just below $6 million in unrealized loss. Liquidation level, $130,000. And let's take a look at the liquidity to give us a little bit more insight. You can see that on the 12-hour time frame, there is a lot of liquidity on both sides of the spectrum. So this would be one of those areas where you simply just don't want to get chopped up. If you're taking on positions, only risk a small amount of your capital. For example, in my free premium group, I entered an altcoin short, but I'm only risking a tiny bit of my capital just to play around in this market and make some gains while the market continues to chop around. Now, waiting for that positioning, I want to see us wipe out a lot of longs and shorts. You can see here that on the 24-hour time frame, there is a pretty big cluster below $120,000, but most of that liquidity is to the upside at this point in time. Now, if we really zoom out here and go on the 30-day time frame, you can see that there are still indeed more longs in the market, and I think a lot of people are eager to go ahead and long this breakout because the consensus is that Bitcoin will likely be moving much, much higher. Now, I know that I also have some perma bears that are watching me on the channel. Just to be perfectly clear, yes, we tried to short this top, but I don't think that the bull market peak is in. I still think we move higher, despite the fact that it's also likely, in my opinion, that this quarterly candle could be closing red, as we've seen time and time again from the bear market lows. So in the short term here, are we going to come and collect all this liquidity, get everyone even more bearish, and then go ahead and pump it? I actually think it's more than likely. We also have the fact that on the 1-day time frame, as you can see, more and more people are indeed piling into shorts, and on the 7-day time frame, it's starting to paint the same exact picture. I want to see everyone get max bearish, despite the fact that we're starting to see early signs. There are still quite a lot of longs in this market, and I don't think that the market makers will make it so easy for us to just absolutely explode to the upside from here. Only time will tell. I would be expecting a couple more wicks down to this region, but ultimately, if we manage to hold this level, which is the range's point of control, along with the value area high, right around this zone, then in my opinion, it could be considered a pretty strong longing opportunity for the last leg of this bull market cycle. And I also wanted to touch on the Bitcoin ETF flow. You can see that we're starting to slow down a little bit. Yesterday alone, we had just under $200 million worth of inflows, with $255 million worth of inflows coming from BlackRock, of course, as others are starting to offload some of their Bitcoin. And taking a look at ETH, we actually had some negative, so outflows for ETH, but once again, BlackRock continuing to accumulate their Ethereum. And I wanted to quickly wrap up this video with what Trader Main had to say, and I completely agree with this, so I thought it'd be excellent to share. I think Bitcoin is in one of these circled areas. Yes, we could pull back a little bit more, we could chop around a bit, but the breakout is coming and many people will be left sidelined trying to time the exact bottom. This is something that I'm going to be careful with, because if you're waiting for Bitcoin to go down below $100,000 before you go long, anticipating the last leg of this bull market cycle, I do think that you will likely miss the boat. Now you can see that here we have this sideways price movement and we are just wicking above the high, coming back down, and this is of course the weekly time frame, then we end up pumping. Same thing over here, wicking above the high, coming back down, then we go ahead and pump. We wicked above the high more recently. I think likely if the candle closes, the weekly candle that is, closes as is right now, then I do think we can retest lower levels. But ultimately, I would be looking to consider starting some swing longs. Let's see how it plays out. I have not personally entered quite yet, but I don't think that the top is in and the bearishness just continues. If we start to liquidate some of those longs that I talked about, then at that point in time, I think that most of the timeline will be bearish, and that would be the perfect opportunity to go max long in my honest opinion. At least that's what I will be doing. And that sums up today's quick video. The timeline is starting to get more and more bearish, and I am eyeing an opportunity to go max long in this market. I don't think that the top is in, despite the fact that the quarterly candles would suggest that this quarter, Bitcoin's candle may go ahead and close red, even though we can go ahead and pump higher beforehand. Hope I've made myself extremely clear. That's currently what I'm going for. Just wanted to zoom out and give you the bigger picture. And if you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.